Hello, everyone, and welcome to this special first impressions episode. Pandemonia is here with me, and we're going to be talking about a lot of the Boomsday cards that have been revealed since the last Magma Rages episode. We don't want to cram too much into the next Magma Rages episode, so that's why we're going to fill in some of these first impressions here. So let's have a look, and we can start off here with Druid. And the first card we have here is Gloop Sprayer. This is an 8-mana 4/4 common druid minion with Battle Cry. Summon a copy of each adjacent minion. So, Pandemonia, what are the wacky wombo combos we're going to be doing with Gloop Sprayer?
So, in the magical Christmas land world, where you play Malagos, and then the following turn you play the problem is you'd have to play like Malagos. Then you'd have to play like Faceless or Flabidinous Floop. And then the turn after, you'd play this guy for like a stupid amount of damage, right?
Yeah, or Taldaram is the cheapest way of making a Malagos copy, essentially, to get the extra copies with this. But as you say, that is very much...
You're probably winning by then, right? That's like the whole point.
I mean, the thing is, with Malagos Druid, if you stick Malagos for a turn, most of the time you're going to win. So if Gloop Sprayer is coming down to, get you more Malagoses, that's probably unnecessary. And honestly, you usually don't need two. If you need extra Malagoses, one is usually enough. So, I mean, you'd rather just play Faceless Manipulator a lot of the time.
Yes. Yeah, and exactly.
I mean, that's the big problem for me with Gloop Sprayer. I mean, it really needs to be in some kind of, big deck. Like a big druid where you have some big minions that you want to copy, maybe some taunts or something. That's kind of the best usage I can think for it.
But the whole thing is, like, if you want to... So the question is, if you want to play this on 8, right, which is obviously the dream, is you need essentially, like, to have played a 6-mana, like, taunt, and then a 7-mana taunt. Like, or 6-mana decent minion, a 7-mana decent minion, and they both need to be still alive. And so the question comes, is if you're doing that, majority of the time, you're winning, right? If your 6-drop and 7-drop are alive enough that you want to create copies of them, you're probably winning that game.
Yeah, I mean, the one situation I envisage where you could possibly get away with this is if you play, let's say, you have a big drop you played last turn that survives, and you have Twig equipped, and then you can play like a Lich King and then attack with your Twig and play Gloop Sprayer. But I mean, sure, you get an extra Lich King, an extra whatever your other big drop is, but I just don't see that as necessary, and I just don't see any real place for Gloop Sprayer.
Yep, and I mean, most of the times, instead of trying to go into all the effort to try and make this work, you're probably better off just playing a big 8-mana dude. Like, you're better off playing the Lich King, or just playing, let's say the basic, what's the Ironbark Protector even. You might you might be better off playing the 8-mana 8/8 taunt.
I think the one other thing to consider with this, and this is probably the only saving grace, is it does have synergy with Flabidinous Floop, because when Flabidinous Floop becomes a copy of this in your hand, it will still get the Battle Cry. That's something else that's interesting about Flabidinous Floop compared to like cards like Faceless Manipulator and that. If you're playing a 4-mana card that can summon 2, then maybe that's good. But I still don't think that's not gonna cut it for like your Malagos combo decks, and even for like some big druid decks. I'm not sure that's really gonna cut it. So I don't really see a home for Gloop Sprayer.
Unfortunately not.
And next up for Druid, we have Juicy Psych Melon. Juicy Psych Melon is a 4-mana epic spell draw, a 7, 8, 9, and 10 cost minion from your deck. So 4-mana, draw 4 cards. That must be making you poggers, right?
Yeah. That's I saw this. I was like, "Oh, that's a juicy watermelon right there."
No, it's a Psych Melon. Jeez.
Psych Melon. Sorry, but yeah, when I saw the essentially draw 4 cards, not just that, but like the fact that it's very specific is it's essentially a tutor. And if anything we've learned from Hearthstone and previous card games, so like notably Magic the Gathering, is that tutors are very powerful effects. I mean, we've seen it with the Hearthstone from cards like Master Oakheart, which pulls very specific cards out of your deck.
For players that don't know, tutor is basically a term we use to refer to cards that draw a narrow selection of cards from your deck. So, like you're saying, Master O card that gets you specifically 1, 2, 3 attack minions. This is getting you the 7, 8, 9, and 10 cost minions. So, what's the kind of synergies that we're hoping for this? We can go Wild Growth on 2 into Juicy Psych Melon into Nourish in order to play that 7 drop the turn after.
Yeah, the thing about it is even though sure it says draw 7, 8, 9, 10, like if I think about it, I would honestly be happy. Drawing just 2 of those 4 is probably okay a lot of times. 3 is good. 3 is already good. If you look at branching paths for draw, if you look at what draw 2 cards usually costs, you would say, and the fact that this is specific, you'd say 4 mana for draw 2 specific cards is probably quite good. But like, if you draw in anything more than that, if you draw in the full 3 or 4, I think it's very powerful. 7 drops is not that many at the moment. 8, you've got Lich Kings, but you've got mainly Lich King. 9, you've got a lot of options. You've got everything ranging from Malygos for like the combo druids to, we spoke about Scenarios if you want to play like a more token based deck.
To Master Oakheart or Dragon Hatcher.
Alexstrasza, Ysera, any big dragon really, Sleepy Dragon even. 10 mana, it's mainly
and Hadronox,
Hadronox. 10, it's your Deathwing, your Tyrantus, and also what's at 10?
Ultrasaur is 10, isn't it?
Ultrasaur's 10,
but you're not playing Ultrasaur on your deck, so that's
sure. If you want to perhaps go the Treant route, the Lawnmower dude.
Oh, Mulch Muncher, yeah. Okay, so we've mentioned quite a few. So I think there's 2 kind of scenarios for this deck, and let's talk about the combo potential first with the combo deck, right? So this is the deck where you're drawing maybe Lich King and Malygos for your Malygos Druid. That's pretty good because sometimes when you're like Malygos at the bottom of your deck, that can be really awkward. And you really don't want that. A lot of the times it's maybe even more important to draw Twig than it is to draw Malygos early on because you want to start getting those charges used. But having Juicy Psych Melon to guarantee you to draw Malygos a lot of the times, or at least, currently the decks are running Malygos and Alexstrasza, but maybe you cut the Alexstrasza to guarantee that the Psych Melon actually draws you Malygos. And then the question with that is, and these big decks in general, is do you ever run 2 Psych Melons? In fact, I suppose that's a question in general for Psych Melon, because a lot of the time you might draw 2 or 3 cards the first time you play Psych Melon, but then the second time, how many are you realistically going to draw?
That's actually a very good point. It's like, sure, you after the first one, and then the follow-up question then is, do you really want to be running 2 or 3, 8, 9, 10 drops, right?
The only deck that realistically is ever going to do that is like Big Druid.
Yeah. So I think it will be interesting to see how because you want to see Juicy Psych Melon, but you never want to see both. Yeah. So we'll have to see if one is enough, which it might be, because it might just complement another another turn 4 play, let's say with Twig, right?
Yeah. Okay, and then the other scenario that's actually quite interesting that you spoke about was Scenarios and the Mulch Muncher. This is actually what I think might be pretty good for Juicy Psych Melon. So this is in some kind of token druid deck where we're playing Soul of the Forest and Whispering Woods. So Psych Melon is a good way to get your hand size up before you play your Whispering Woods, and it helps you get key cards like Lich King is good in that deck, obviously. Scenarios is pretty good if you are, it's currently seeing play in some of the token druid decks already. And if you're specifically trying to get synergy with that Mulch Muncher, then it's pretty good as well because you get another 2 Treants. And then getting the Mulch Muncher as your 10 cost is really nice because it's actually going to be reduced from 10, right? Sometimes you might even play Psych Melon on turn 10 or something, or when you have 10 mana, which is usually not turn 10 for druids. And you might actually be able to play the Mulch Muncher straight away, right? Because you would have only needed 4 Treants to die, which is not unrealistic. So I think that could definitely be one way to actually make good use of Juicy Psych Melon, to kind of up your hand size after you've played cards, like Wild Growth or Landscaping and those kind of cards.
the only problem I foresee with that is currently in the token deck, the token druid decks, the four mana spots is contested by cards like Violet Teacher and Oaken Summons, and so now the question becomes: is do you run this in addition to it? Do you drop the Oaken Summons, because Violet Teacher is quite an important part of, I think, the token deck.
Sure.
So it comes down to, do you drop the Oaken Summons now?
I think for me, it's a question of not like, I don't think that this clashes with you playing Oaken Summons at all. And that's the key. I mean, I think you can still play one Psych Melon, maybe two, if you have other alternatives at 8 and 9 cost, or if you just are happy with your second one, maybe just drawing the Mulch Muncher alone. But I don't think you're really going to play Violet Teacher on 4 a lot, even though it's 4 mana. You kind of want to play it in synergy, or, you know, in the same turn you play something like Power of the Wild a lot of the time. Sure. Against certain decks, fine, you can drop it on 4, but against those decks, you don't want to be playing Psych Melon on turn 4 anyway. So I don't really think it clashes as much with those cards as we might expect.
Your 4 drop is going to be quite. I mean, you're still running Branching Paths and Swipe.
Sure, but I mean, a lot of those cards are 4 mana, but they're not played on 4, right? Like, we're talking Violet Teacher not played on 4, Swipe not played on 4 unless you're against specific decks, and you know, it's not going to be a question of, ooh, do I play the Psych Melon or the Swipe here? It's going to be like, if I need a Swipe on turn 4, I'm going to Swipe. You know?
Sure.
So I don't actually think, you know, when we talk about 4 drops, cards you definitely want to play on 4 on like a empty board state. We're talking Oaken Summons, Psych Melon, and maybe Branching Paths sometimes if you just need to draw. So I think Psych Melon, you know, it does a better job than Branching Paths in terms of drawing there, unless you're looking for very specific cards to draw. So I like Psych Melon in maybe that context, but we're going to have to wait and see. Druid has a lot of powerful spells and honestly, some pretty powerful decks, so it's actually kind of difficult for some of these cards to make an impact, I think.
Yeah, for sure. But Psych Melon, I definitely watch out for that card. I think it's definitely going to be, it has the potential to be very powerful.
Yeah. If not right now, it could also be pretty powerful in the future because of that ability to get that very specific draw, as we mentioned.
Yeah.
So moving on to Hunter, we have the Hunter Legendary and Scientist for this expansion, Boommaster Flark. Boommaster Flark is a 7 mana 5/5 with Battle Cry, summon 4 0/2 Goblin Bombs. So these 0/2 Goblin Bombs have a Death Rattle that deals 2 damage to the enemy hero. They're 1 mana 0/2 mechs. They are individual cards on their own, but let's just talk about Boommaster Flark first, and you know, how good is it to get what is essentially 5 8, what's 8 plus 5? 513 in stats, right?
Yeah, 5. Yeah. So I saw this card, I was like, yeah, another unplayable Hunter Legendary. It, like,
I mean, you say that, but actually, the current Hunter Legendaries are pretty playable. Like Houndmaster, Houndmaster Shaw, King Crush, even Katharina. Like, current Hunter Legendaries are actually pretty good.
I'm saying we went through a phase of like Dread Scale and Acid Maw, right?
Yeah, like, they tend to print Hunter Legendaries that look kind of weird.
Yeah, so I mean, this one, it's got that sort of a bit late game sort of extra damage. Like, you know, so the problem, obviously, the first problem is the 0/2 bombs. You have to kill them somehow.
Yeah. Like, unlike Boombots back in the day, they can't attack to activate themselves.
So, I mean, you need to either do something like Void Ripper or buff them or something. And
Defender of Argus.
Exactly. And so the problem is a 7 mana 5/5. Pretty bad stats. Not something you really want to play on turn 5. Doesn't impact the board immediately. Those bots just clog up the board a lot of the times.
Yeah, so, I mean, the question is, are the bombs ever good because they're mechs? You know, are you ever playing this in like a deck with some magnetic minions that you can attach to the bombs and get them to attack that way?
Sure, but if you're saving your magnetic minions for like after turn 8, turn 9, turn 10,
yeah,
like you are probably in a very good position. If you played Boommaster Flark on turn like 7, let's say turn 7, and you they've all survived, and you haven't won, you're probably still in a very good position. Like you're probably not losing that game.
Sure, and I mean, if you think about like a Hunter Curve, maybe for a deck like this, if you're playing like Deathstalker Rex on turn 6, I'd most of the time rather just hero power and play a 5-drop than I would play Boommaster Flark. I mean, there really has to be some kind of payoff for getting all these bombs on the board. I think it also needs to... I mean, this card is obviously reminiscent of Dr. Boom himself, right? It's a 7-mana legendary that gives you like other bodies on the board that explode and they're bombs, right? I mean, that's clearly the kind of indication they're going off, but I think people need to understand that it's very, very different to Dr. Boom for 2 reasons. Obviously, you can't activate those bombs naturally. That's a big thing. And secondly, the fact that the bombs only deal damage to face is a lot worse than Boombots. Boombots were very powerful at clearing the board and allowing, let's say, Dr. Boom himself to go face. And so that's a really, really important thing to look at with these bombs. I mean,
and a 7-mana 5/5. Whereas like Dr. Boom, 7-mana 7/7, 7-mana 7/7 was a lot more impactful on the board in terms of it requires you kind of have to deal with it immediately. Whereas a 5/5, sure, but it's dying to many 6-drops, and it's dying to a lot of cards that are less than 7 mana.
Yeah, exactly. So overall, we're not too excited about Boommaster Flark. I think it's a little bit too much work for what it's worth. I think Hunter has more efficient ways of dealing damage a lot of the time.
One last thing. This plus Void Rip on turn 10 deals 8 damage to face.
Yeah, sure. But as we're saying, I mean, as we kind of discussed when we first saw this card, you can just play like, a beast plus 2 kill commands to get similar, or you can just get 2 huffers, right? And it's just easier to do other things than go Boommaster Flark plus the Void Ripper a lot of the time. Okay, so next let's just talk about the Goblin Bomb whilst we've got it in front of in the foreground of our minds here. So Goblin Bomb is also a standalone card. It's a 1-mana 0/2 mech, as we said that Death Rattle deal 2 damage to enemy hero. Do you ever want to play a 1-mana 0 attack minion first of all?
No. So the short answer is no. The long answer is no.
I mean, obviously the idea here is it's a 1-mana mech. You can magnetize to it, but we have yet to see any magnetic minions that are 2 mana. So there is no reason to curve a mech on 1 right now.
I mean, there's the fireworks tech that we'll talk about in a bit.
Yeah, the fireworks tech, sure, but I can't see Goblin Bomb being played right now. Only in the most aggressive of magnetic decks. And so far, we've not seen anything at 2 mana to kind of indicate that we can do that as a magnetic deck. So for now, Goblin Bomb is a fat no as well from me. And then we have Cybertech Chip. There. I also keep wanting to say cybernetic, as we discussed there. They're missing a good old Terminator reference here that they could have gotten. So Cybertech Chip is a 2-mana hunter spell. Give your minions Death Rattle. Add a random mech to your hand. So the Infest for mechs, basically.
Yeah, basically. I mean, the first thing you think about this is like, wait, this is pretty much just. It's 2 mana instead of 3 mana. Infest was 3 mana.
Yep.
And instead of adding beasts that infested, this adds a random mech to your hand.
Yep.
So the problem comes Infest saw 0 competitive play.
Yeah. At 1 mana cheaper, that's nice, but I also think mechs are pretty bad. I mean, Goblin Bomb is an example of a bad mech.
Sure, and the problem is ultimately comes down to you spending 2 mana to do nothing. I mean, it's semi-decent if you can play this and then trade some of your mechs away that same turn. That's the same
minions,
thing.
Yeah. They don't have to be mechs,
away.
yeah.
I mean, your minions.
But they're most likely going to be mechs because in a deck where you're playing this, you probably want the mechs specifically, right? Yeah.
But yeah, like you say, random mechs. Gone are the days of disgusting. Let's put it this way: if this was a card in Goblins versus Gnomes, my assessment would have been a bit different because you had like Piloted Shredder, and you had some quite high value targets you could get.
Mech Warper,
Sneed Shredder. Whereas at the moment, there's no what mechs do you want to get?
Yeah, I can't think of much.
I can't think of I can't think of one that you'd love to get every time.
Yeah, and I mean the idea with this is it's kind of less aggressive card draw for Hunter. I mean that's what they've tried to do with a lot of the kind of resource generation options for Hunter. But a lot of the times I'd rather once again just rely on Deathstalker Rexar to give me value than Cybertech Chip. So I'd just rather be hero powering almost every time as a way to spend 2 mana even before the Deathstalker Rexar. So Cybertech Chip is not looking like a great option for Hunter so far. And then next we have Fireworks Tech. Fireworks Tech is a 2 mana 2/1 a rare minion with Battle Cry. Give a friendly mech +1/+1. If it has Death Rattle, trigger it. Trigger it. So Fireworks Tech. This is obviously meant you can play this on your Goblin Bomb. You get 2 damage immediately, and you get a 1/3.
So
and a 2/1.
basically, it's similar to. I mean, there's that mini cleric. I can't. It's not Shattersun cleric. There's a 2 mana 2/1. No. There's a 2 mana 2/1 cleric that buffs a minion +1/+1. And then obviously the death rattle, triggering death rattle, similar to Terrascale Hide. What's it?
Terrascale Stalker.
There we go. Yeah. So this is kind of a hybrid of the two.
Yeah, the difference being you can't target any death rattle. That's very important with Terrascale Stalker.
So it's a lot more limiting.
Yeah, it doesn't work in the current death rattle hunter decks because you're trying to hit eggs and cubes and Kathrinas and that, and Fireworks Tech doesn't do that.
So if they print it not like Goblin Bomb is a 1-drop, but if they print like let's say a 1-drop like Possessed Villager that's a mech, then you could be talking that this might be
Mech Villager.
Yeah, or Alley Cat that has the death rattle instead of the summon.
Yeah,
like basically
exactly.
A 1/1 that summon a 1/1 mech that has a death rattle. Then you might be in business. But
maybe.
As long as the only 1-drop is Goblin Bomb, I think this is probably a no.
Yeah, and if we're looking at ways to curve out as Hunter, we would almost always rather just go Diamol into Crackling Razormaw.
Exactly.
I mean, that's the big thing that kind of sticks out to me right now is why do I want to play mechs in Hunter if I can just play beasts? The cards that synergize with beasts are so powerful. Like I mean, Houndmaster, Kill Command. Like, why do I want to play any of these other things over things that synergize with beasts? Is the big question to me.
Yeah. So we'll have to wait to see if there's any more cards that really go play a mech hunter, right?
Yeah, I mean, Spider Bomb is clearly one of the best targets for Fireworks Tech because you can kind of kill a minion and then you can trade and kill another minion. But you have to be pretty far behind on board for that to work out well for you. And that's not really a position Hunter is ever planning on being in. And next up, moving to Mage, we have Cosmic Anomaly. Cosmic Anomaly is a 4-mana, 4/3 elemental with spell damage +2. So I think previously when we spoke about the Celestial Dreamer? Emissary, that one. The 2-mana 2/1 that gives you spell damage +2 for your next spell. We kind of thought, we said, they don't like giving spell damage +2 because of the combat potentials, and then they go and give us Cosmic Anomaly. So, are we looking at any kind of combo potentials with Cosmic Anomaly?
So not anymore because obviously previously there was Ice Lance. I can see the tier. I mean, basically, Cosmic Anomaly is just strictly better than Evolve Cobalt. Evolve Cobalt was a 4-mana 2/2 with spell damage +2, whereas this is a 4-mana 4/3 with spell damage +2, and it's got the elemental tag.
Yeah.
So the question is, why would you play this over Celestial Emissaries? You're trying to obviously you want to get the repeatable +2 spell damage. You don't just want your next spell, you want more spells. But 4-mana 4/3 that not exactly a great body. I mean, currently, you could play this on turn 10 with a Fireball and a Frostbolt to deal 13 damage.
Yeah,
I mean, seems...
Or this plus like 2 Arcane Missiles. That's 10 damage split across the board for 6 mana. Or
this plus 2 Cinder Storms is 14 damage.
Yeah.
I mean, so there is...
There are ways to use it, right? But the question is, in those kind of mage decks where you want this kind of aggressive damage, do you really want to play a 4-mana 4/3? And I suppose they generally are lacking 4-drops. I mean, they're mostly playing the Arcane Keysmith. I think you might even consider replacing this with replacing Arcane Keysmith with this, because it does have some potential in the later game, and it is like a threat that your opponent needs to kill. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, the elemental tag is also something to consider.
One by elemental on 5.
Yeah, it helps you curve into that, but I mean, you'd rather play the Leyline Manipulator just to have more stats on board in most of the elemental decks.
Yeah, that's true.
If you're playing Cosmic Anomaly and then curving into Bonfire Elemental, you're really not taking advantage of the +2 spell damage. That's the key there.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, the other sort of cute combos, the similar ones you could have with Celestial Emissary, are this plus, like, we're going to talk about the next card, Shooting Star, or this plus Arcane Missiles. It's got similar synergies, but Celestial Emissary at 2 mana is probably just going to be more relevant more of the time, I think, in terms of the tempo play.
I think, look, if there's maybe like an elemental deck with a lot of these damaging spells, it can be pretty good. There's Flame Geyser, the 2 mana spell that deals 2 damage. Now that works pretty well with Cosmic Anomaly and with the Celestial Emissary as a way of getting extra damage, and it gives you that Flame Elemental in your hand, so you can actually play that to keep your elemental synergy going. So maybe if we're playing an elemental deck with some burn in as well, that's a way to use Cosmic Anomaly and Celestial Dreamer together. There's also Unexpected Results. You can play Cosmic Anomaly, Unexpected Results on turn 8 to get 2 other 4-drops.
But the question really is, like, there's not many times you'd want this over Celestial Emissary.
Sure. You could, if you'd played this, and or if you Unexpected Results can give you Cosmic Anomalies, which is actually a pretty good result if you upgrade it, with like spell damage +2. So
yeah, I mean, that's just so. I still think right now Celestial Emissary is probably 10 times better, I think you'd play the Celestial Emissary first. You'd play 2 of them, and then you would decide, do you want to play a Cosmic Anomaly or 2?
Yeah, Cosmic Anomaly is definitely for a slower deck than the Celestial Emissary. I mean, that's the key here. I don't think the card is bad. I'm just not sure that kind of deck is really going to exist. Okay, quick maths on the Christmas Dreamland, where you play this into Unexpected Results and get 2 Cosmic Anomalies. Now, not the maths that happens, because that is extremely low. But if that does happen, you could play 2 Arcane Explosions, 2 Arcane Missiles for 7 damage each. I mean, you may as well just play Cosmic Anomaly and then 2 Cinderstorms in that case.
Or wait for it. You might just as well play double Fireball Frostbolt for 15 damage.
Sure. But you don't get 3 4 3s. Yeah. Anyway, even in that scenario, I'm not sure that Unexpected Results synergy is that great. But maybe Cosmic Anomaly will see some play. It's difficult to say at this point. We're going to have a look once we've got everything to look at. But the other card they revealed with Cosmic Anomaly was Shooting Star, and we briefly mentioned it here because it obviously has that spell damage synergy. It's a 1 mana spell. It's a common, and it reads deal 1 damage to a minion and the minions next to it. So reminiscent of Cone of Cold in the way that it deals 1 damage to kind of 3 minions. But obviously it doesn't have the freeze effect, so you can kind of also compare it to Arcane Explosion.
And what's the other one? Grievous Bite in a way?
Yeah, Grievous Bite as well.
It's basically
Explosive Shot.
It's 1 mana less than Grievous Bite. It deals 1 damage to the. So I like this card in the sense that it's one of those cards that where positioning matters. Yeah. So this I like in the fact that it requires skillful play to try play around it, much like Meteor, where you've got to now carefully consider where you put your minion, where your opponent places your minions.
Yeah. What I like most about this card is that if we look at the current mage decks, like the reason they can't fight for board or play a more mid-range strategy is because they just really suck at fighting for board against any of the kind of Zooey decks we see. So maybe Shooting Star is kind of the key piece that makes them have more of a minion focused approach, that facilitates cards like Arcane Anomaly and Celestial Emissary so that you can use the Shooting Stars to help control the board.
Yeah, I mean, like the benefit also is that as I read it, if that that damage gets buffed by spell power, it deals to all the targets.
Yes.
So like instead of 1 damage to all, we get 2 damage to both of them. So I mean that's obviously like quite good compared to. Well, no, actually, never mind. All spell power upgrades all the numbers, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But the dream, I think, is like turn 1 Mana Worm, turn 2 Sorcerer's Apprentice. This to clear what they played on turn 1.
Yeah.
That,
I was thinking that as well. It's a key thing to help you snowball your board a little bit further. I actually think Shooting Star, even though it can't go face, which is a lot of the times what you want from your spells, it might have good synergy as well with the legendary as well, Stargazer Luna, because it's a cheap spell. So you can kind of top deck it and keep playing spells, especially if you have a Sorcerer's Apprentice on the board. I think ultimately, though, I mean, we've seen cards like Maelstrom Portal, which is similar in that it deals 1 damage to a bunch of minions, be good in kind of tempo-based aggressive board decks, which is kind of what we're theorizing Shooting Star for, right? So maybe Shooting Star actually does have some applications in those kind of decks.
Yeah, especially since sometimes you'll play Arcane Missiles with the Sorcerer's Apprentice and hope it hits 3 minions, right?
Yeah. So I actually really like Shooting Star. I think it really helps deal with one of Mage's weaknesses, and one of the reasons Mage actually has to be so aggressive and have lots of burn damage is because they simply can't keep control of the board for very long, and Shooting Star helps them at least fight for board a little bit more, whilst not just helping them, smork. So I like Shooting Star for that reason. And then next up, we have Paladin, and we have the Paladin scientist himself, Kangor. We have Crystal Smith Kangor. He has a 2 mana, 1/2 legendary minion with Divine Shield and Lifesteal, and your healing is doubled. So, first of all, a little bit surprised that Kangor is not a mech, considering mech is kind of the theme for the Paladin.
Well, they even had synergies with, or not just that he's not like. I mean, the fact is, I could understand he's not a mech, but like he doesn't have any synergies with mechs whatsoever.
True. I suppose none of the scientists seem like they're mechs, so that's a fair point as to, I suppose mechs are kind of creations of scientists rather than any of them scientists themselves being mechs. So lore-wise, that does make sense. But yeah, I'm surprised, with having seen Kangor's Endless Army specifically be the legendary spell have to do with mech synergy. I expected Kangor himself to also be related to that. But we see here, I think Crystal Smith Kangor here is very different. I mean, what are the kind of decks we're looking to make use of the healing being doubled? Because ultimately the 2 mana 1/2 Divine Shield is not that good because it doesn't have something like Taunt.
So like the kind of card like this screams to me Control Paladin. A Paladin that just is trying to just stay just basically just store the early game until they can like a old school play play Tyrion, play big dudes. I mean, this kind of reminds me a little bit of Wicker Flame Burn Bristle. The major difference is obviously the stats. It costs 1 less and has 1 less attack, and obviously the main problem with this card I think is it doesn't have taunt.
And I mean, sure, your healing gets doubled, so obviously Crystal Smith Kangor kind of heals you double the damage it deals. That's the immediate synergy here. But I think outside of that, we don't have Forbidden Healing anymore for Paladins. So what are the kind of cards you're really wanting to play with this? I mean, there's
Lay on Hands.
Sure. Lay on Hands is I mean, Lay on Hands is maybe not so bad. Is it Holy Light, isn't it? That's a 2 mana 6 heal. Yeah.
You don't really want to be playing that in your deck.
No.
So.
Although there was one, I think Crane or somebody brought it to playoffs, or Boar, or somebody. There was some
like a
pro player that brought it.
It was like a tech against aggro though.
Yeah.
It was a very niche tech though.
Yeah, exactly. But anyway, the other kind of obvious thing is True Silver Champion. That's probably the more realistic, actually good card to play with it. Maybe in a deck with like Glass Knight, if you want to make use of the Divine Shields, maybe we're going down the Bolvar route as well. But ultimately, this deck doesn't sound convincing to me. It doesn't sound like it's going to be as powerful as like Odd Paladin. The one other nice thing that Crystal Smith Kangor does is whilst it's in your deck, it is buffing. What's the 4 mana Corpse Taker? Yes, Corpse Taker. With Divine Shield and Lifesteal.
Basically similar to what Wicker Flame did.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
without
True.
taunt, basically, is the major difference.
Yeah, but I mean, it's another way to have lifesteal in your deck, and then there's probably going to be other taunts in that deck. So maybe Crystal Smith Kangor can see some play and something like that. Maybe in an even Paladin, if that's a thing again. Because a lot of these synergies cards we're talking about are even as well. So like an even kind of control Paladin. I don't know. I'm not super convinced by Crystal Smith Kangor, but I do think the effect is pretty powerful if you can find a good way to make use of it.
The card is objectively not bad. I just think it's going to struggle to find an actual deck that will be good in.
Yeah. Okay, so let's look at the other Paladin cards. We have Christology. Christology here is a 2-mana spell. Draw 2 1-attack minions from your deck. So obviously we were just talking about Crystal Smith Kangor. Christology will draw you Crystal Smith Kangor. It can also draw you cards like Bolvar that we mentioned, as well as cards like Lanessa. So maybe for...
potential.
Yeah, for some kind of combo deck. Maybe even for the much fabled Quest Paladin. If you're if you want to draw Lanessa to get more use out of your buffs or something, or you use your buffs first and then you Christology, you get Lanessa and you can play it. But I'm not convinced by that either.
The tutor parts once again is obviously very tempting. The fact that it's very niche. So other cards you can fetch. I'm not sure how good they are. I mean, you could tutor for things like Acolyte.
Yeah, you can curve
just to get that draw engine. This filters your deck and then gets you card draw.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what other 1-attack minions would you really want to draw. I mean, the fact that you also draw them, that you still remember that at some point you have to play them.
Yeah.
It's not, unfortunately, it's not like Court of Arms.
Yeah, I think it would be a little too powerful if it was like Court of Arms, because you could be putting those Bolvars in play. If I could play 2 mana to play Bolvar on turn 1, I definitely would. On turn 2, sorry. That would be a bit silly. But I think Christology, maybe in decks with Acolyte, those are traditionally control Paladins as well. So it seems like with this and Kangor, they're definitely trying to take Paladin in a slower direction as well. And I think there's no surprise that these cards are evenly costed as well. If this was 1 mana to draw 2 1-attack minions, that would probably be pretty good for Odd Paladin. Just as a cheap way to get more cards to play and kind of filter your deck a little bit better. So
you can thank Blizzard for that.
Yeah, I mean, the one other thing I'm thinking is Stonehill Defender. That's actually not too bad to draw as well. So you can curve Christology into Stonehill Defender. But
once again, also more value once you draw more cards.
Yeah,
so
definitely.
A much slower game plan. So we'll see. And I mean, the next card we're going to be talking about, I think, also kind of leans itself to this whole strategy.
Yeah, and that's Shrink Ray. Shrink Ray is a 5-mana rare spell. Set the attack and health of all minions to 1. So all of these cards have had something to do with attack being 1. I mean, Kangor himself was. The Christology obviously draws you your own 1-attack minions. Shrink Ray is kind of a similar effect to
Sunkeeper?
I was going to say to Eldor Peacekeeper, but like it's like an Eldor Peacekeeper combined with an equality.
It's humility and equality for the board, basically.
Yeah.
So you're playing basically 4 mana. I mean, equality is 2 mana. So you're basically paying 3 mana to change the attack of all minions to 1.
And health, though.
And health, yeah. So it's the equality section.
Yeah, so I mean, health I think is the important part. It gives you kind of a second or a third or fourth possible equality for control decks, and by itself as well, it will also just neutralize a board. So you don't always have to combine it immediately with like a Pyromancer or a consecration or something like that. You can kind of use it by itself. So I think for those kind of control paladins, it does seem quite powerful. At least if we're seeing a meta that has lots of kind of mid-range decks with fewer bigger minions, rather than something like token druid, where they're not going to care too much if their minions are 1/1s. They're still going to savage roar you in the face for a ton.
So on sort of this potential synergies, it's I was just thinking, if you have a board of like dudes, so the dream scenario is you somehow got a board of dudes that all have Divine Shield. You play Shrink Ray. You basically trade your dude's Divine Shield off, and then the turn after you play Sunkeeper to him and win.
Sure.
Right?
You could have just played equality in that scenario, though, right?
Yeah, sure. Sure. Actually, yeah.
Yeah.
Wait, never mind.
I mean, maybe
Never mind.
for odd paladin. I mean, these cards are odd, so maybe if we wanted to build some kind of odd paladin that actually made use of this, I think it would have to be a slower odd paladin. Control odd paladin. I mean, ultimately, if you can get a lot of use out of the hero power, it's actually pretty good for a control deck, right?
Okay, but the problem is no quality, no consecration, no choose of a champion, no lay on hands.
Most of the good control cards are exactly in even.
Yeah.
Which is, I think, also part of the reason this isn't odd.
Yeah. And also, yeah, I mean, if it was 4 mana, it could be a bit too busted.
Yeah. I think Shrink Ray is not too bad. I just don't know if it's better, really, and like whether you even need a third or fourth equality or something that can kind of do board neutralization just by itself, right?
Yeah, I mean,
if you're hitting 2 like 4 or 5 attack or more minions with this, it's pretty good. Yeah, I mean it is pretty good against Druid.
Against any decks that's cheat, like even Paladin that's just, I mean even Warlock that's playing lesser giants or Twilight Drakes, this is like semi-removal, so it's like
against
that bad.
Yeah, against even Warlock, Big Druid, Taunt Druid, those are kind of decks that this could be decent against.
Anything playing big dudes, more than one big dude, basically, it's pretty good, I think.
Yeah. Okay, so moving on to Priest now, we have Xeric, Master Cloner. This is obviously the scientist and legendary for Priest. 6 mana, 5/5 with Death Rattle. If you've cast any spells on this minion, re-summon it. So, first idea was like, oh, that's pretty cool. You can have this kind of recurring 5/5. And then you actually realize, is that really something you want? Like, what does this ultimately accomplish for you is first of all the first question, and then secondly, how hard is it to actually do this, right? I mean, what are the ways to do this? We're gonna have to cast Powered Shield.
Yeah, I mean
Flash Heal.
Do we have any buffs at the moment, like besides Powered Shield for Priest?
The spell, the unidentified elixir.
Sure. I mean, okay, the dream is you get a 1/1 copy, right?
Sure. Yeah. In which case, with that scenario and with Vivid Nightmare, the way we understand it is because you would Xeric would get if Xeric gets the buff first, the buff that gives him this Death Rattle, and then it's copied. Both copies would have the Death Rattle to resummon a new 5/5.
Yeah, the problem though is, like, as you're saying, to get value out of this, but also, is that extra effort required? Is that better or worse than just playing Ken? In order for this to be better, you needed to recur. First of all, you need to have played a spell on it, and then you need to ideally trigger the Death Rattle more than once for it to be that much better than Ken.
Exactly.
Because, I mean, Ken currently is a 6 mana 4/5. When it dies, you guaranteed another 4/5.
Yep.
So I'm not like, when we first saw this, I was like, oh, this is pretty cool. And then the more I thought about it, the more I was like, I'll rather just play my Ken Bloodhoof, thank you.
Yeah, and I think that's the key thing about Ken. Like, if you think about a lot of the Priest ways that they have to synergize with Death Rattles, especially if we look at Xeric's Cloning Gallery, legendary spell, where you summoning copies of cards from your deck. In that case, you would have to play Powered Shield or something on the Xeric in order to actually get the Death Rattle. Whereas with Ken, you're just getting the Death Rattle and the 4/5 anyway. Any kind of Resurrect effects are always working better on Ken than they are on Xeric. So ultimately here, I struggle to see how great Xeric could be. But maybe there's some world in which you can recur this enough times for it to count. The funny interaction that I always think of when I look at this is Silence, because that's like the best 0 mana spell you have to cast, but silencing your own Xeric is not going to help.
Yeah, well, it's going to help your opponent. You silence it and then go, oopsie, mistakes were made.
And then you shame concede. Moving on, and we have a card that could be used to target Xeric if it sticks around. Power Word Replicate. Power Word Replicate is a 5 mana epic spell. Choose a friendly minion, summon a 5/5 copy of it. So yay, you can get 2 Xerics, both with the Death Rattle, we believe. That would be pretty cool. But ultimately, is Power Word Replicate? I mean, that's an 11 mana combo, so that's not happening on Xeric on the same turn you play him. And is that really the best kind of use for Power Word Replicate?
Yeah, Power Word Replicate, it obviously is very reminiscent of Faceless Manipulator, but the major difference is that, first of all, this can only copy a friendly minion.
Yeah.
Whereas Faceless, you can copy your opponent's minion. But also, so the fact that it summons a 5/5 is both good and bad. It's obviously good if you're copying something that costs less than 5 and is less than a 5/5.
Yeah.
I mean, if you end up, let's say Loot Hoarder even. If you copy a Loot Hoarder, it becomes a 5/5 with the Death Rattle draw card. It gets a little bit more value like that. Or the problem is late game, 5/5 is obviously a lot weaker. 5/5 Alexstrasza or 5/5 Malig. 5/5 Maligos could be a thing.
Okay, let's ignore the combo deck for a sec, because I'll get back to that. But if we're talking about maybe like the Quest Priest, where you want to get extra Death Rattles, if you have this in your hand and you curve out with Death Rattles and you still have something left on your board, you can Power Word Replicate it on turn 5 as kind of your curve, and then maybe trade off your minion with the Death Rattle. So that's kind of one of the better scenarios I can see for it, but that does require you to kind of be ahead on the board as Quest Priest, which is not all that easy because a lot of the early game minions you're playing are pretty weak. They don't really stick around very well because they have Death Rattle attached to them and therefore kind of have worse stats generally. And then if we look at the combos case in particular, I just don't see why you would ever use Power Word Replicate over Vivid Nightmare. Vivid Nightmare, 3 mana to give you a 1/1 copy. For almost all the combo potential with like Malygos, Valen, or the Radiant Elemental, it doesn't matter the stats of the minion. You're going to kill them with spells afterwards. You just want the effect on the minion. So Vivid Nightmare is always better in those cases because you have 2 extra mana freed up. And if you have the Radiant Elementals on the board, for instance, then you are going to be able to actually just use Vivid Nightmare straight away, right? Or you're going to be able to use it for even cheaper, where the mana cost reduction is even more relevant.
Yeah, so currently, unless there's a lot more great, like sort of big priest-like synergies, I'm not completely sold.
Yeah. And the other case is if you're playing it in some kind of big priest deck and you resurrect with Eternal Servitude, you can use Power Word Replicate. In that kind of a deck, you would also prefer to have a spell over Faceless Manipulator because you don't want to summon a Faceless Manipulator with like your Shadow Essence, for example. Yeah. And you also want to have more spells to charge up your spellstones more. So, that's one deck where, example, it is better than Faceless Manipulator. But that big priest deck is not really something we're seeing very much anymore.
Not something that it doesn't seem to have a lot of support. It doesn't feel like they're trying to push it much either.
Yeah, there's just not enough big minions that are worth kind of pulling anymore. And with no bonds early on, it's struggling. We're basically looking at like Ysera and
Hungry Dragon. What's it not? Hungry Dragon? Steepy Dragon.
No, I was going to say Ysera, Obsidian Statue, and Lich King is kind of the big things you want to pull that were in Big Priest. Maybe if you played like Dragon Hatcher in a kind of Druid-esque way, the big difference there is that you just get to 9 mana a lot slower. So I'm not sure that's really worth it.
You have to stay alive that much longer.
Yeah, with that deck, you're definitely looking to make better use of Shadow Essence rather than like ramping. That's your big key spell. So I'm not really sure Power Word Replicate is going to have any kind of particular home. Moving on to Rogue next, we have the Rogue Scientist Myra Rotspring. Myra Rotspring is a 5 mana 4/2 with Battle Cry. Discover a Death Rattle minion. Also gain its Death Rattle. So Myra will gain the Death Rattle of whichever minion you discover, which is a little bit of a downside because you tell your opponents what minion you've gotten, because they're pretty much going to be able to figure it out based on the Death Rattle that they see on board. So they kind of know one card in your hand. And the other big, massive downside of Myra is that you're paying 5 mana for a 4/2. So whatever Death Rattle you get, it needs to be really impactful.
Yeah, and what's the most impactful Death Rattle right now? In terms of bodies, it's Ken that summons a 4/5. Do you want to play a 5 mana 4/2 that summons a 4/5 on death? Probably not.
Yeah, some of the other best Death Rattles are... Yeah, some of the best other death rattles are outside of Rogue, which doesn't really help you because you can't discover those cards. You know, like Savannah Highmane, Obsidian statues. So, I mean, within Rogue, there's not a lot of good ones we're looking at. We'll look at one coming up next. But, I mean, right now it's like Bone Baron, the 5-mana 5/5 with the summons 2/1 and death rattle. Yeah, I know.
I want to play 5 mana for 4/2 when it dies. Like, put 3/1/1s into my hand. No thanks.
I mean, the other card that this is sometimes or has been compared to is Polluted Hoarder, which was, you know, in a way you get to draw the card immediately, and you will get you can't get Polluted Hoarder because that was Whispers of the Old Gods card, but if you got like Loot Hoarder himself, then you would be able to draw a card on Death Rattle and you draw one immediately. So in a way it's similar. In a way it's just similar because it's like a 4/2 body and you draw a card. And then you just happen to also gain its Death Rattle. So I don't know. There needs to be some really powerful Death Rattles to make this work. And so far we're not really seeing that. And we've actually seen quite a few of the Rogue cards.
Yeah, but I mean, it's one of those sort of interesting Rogue designs. I mean, they're obviously trying to push Death Rattle again.
Yeah.
And like I think eventually people are just going to go, fine, Blizzard, we'll play Death Rattle Rogue just to make you happy.
Yeah. So the story of Blizzard and Rogue is Blizzard going, please play Burgle Raid, please play Burgle Rogue, please play Burgle Rogue, please play Death Rattle Rogue, please play Death Rattle Rogue, and all the Rogue players going, no, we will play other Rogues that are actually good.
Yeah, we'll play Miracle Rogue.
We'll play Miracle Rogue because you don't give us any new cards.
Yeah.
So, like, the best we can do is use neutral cards and the cards from Classic, which are pretty powerful.
Yeah, and I mean, talking about Burgle Rogue, you can tell us about the next card?
Well, I mean, the next card is actually another Death Rattle card to go with Myra. We have Blight Nozzle Crawler. Blight Nozzle Crawler is a 4-mana 2/4 mech with Death Rattle, summon a 1/1 ooze with Poisonous and Rush. So, I mean, getting a 1/1 ooze with Poisonous and Rush is actually pretty good. I mean, you can kind of kill a minion immediately unless there's a taunt in your way, for instance. So that's not too bad. But a lot of the time, I'd rather just play Vilespine Slayer and kill the minion immediately rather than having to wait for my Blight Nozzle Crawler to die. And the other big problem is that your opponent has agency over usually when Blight Nozzle Crawler dies.
Yeah, so you kill the 1/1 quite easily a lot of times as well.
Yeah, exactly. It's very easy for them to kill the 1/1. And they get to choose which minion it's going to go into a lot of the times. So it's only really relevant when you trade your Blight Nozzle Crawler off and then get the 1/1. And if you're trading Blight Nozzle Crawler off as a 4-mana 2/4, you're probably not killing what you're trading it into. So that's kind of a problem.
So yeah, and I feel like the problem with this card also is it makes Myra particularly worse as well, because when you discover it, I'm not sure exactly how much it is, but there's definitely a buff that like you're more likely to see class cards more.
Yeah, it's like 30%, I think.
I'm not sure the percent, but basically that means you're going to be seeing a lot of Blood Nozzle Crawler. And is that an effect you want on your 5-mana 4/2? Majority of the times the answer is probably a no.
No. Because it just makes Myra so easy to kill, and it makes and then that gives them agency once again over what happens with that 1/1 ooze.
So Blood Nozzle Crawler. Probably I don't think it's very good.
Yeah, it is a card that, I mean, there's just so many better things I'd rather do on 4, notably Felderai Strider in almost every Rogue deck, except obviously Odd Rogue, where you can't play this anyway. So, I mean, maybe if there was kind of a mech Rogue, the fact that this has a mech tag might be relevant, but it definitely doesn't seem to be something they're supporting much with Rogue. The one card that can activate the Death Rattle and make it kind of useful is the card we're going to be discussing next. It's a Rogue weapon. It's a 3-mana 3/2 weapon, so that's already a good start for Rogue weapons. Usually they're absolute garbage stats for their mana cost. So
well, I mean, they were Shadow Blades. So
sure. But like, I mean, it's usually like 4-mana 1/4s and stuff like that.
Petition Blade and...
Well, not Petition's Blade. I'm talking about like... the 4-mana 1, whatever, it doesn't matter. They're all trash. Like, don't trigger. I'm not going to trigger myself by talking about them. So Necreum Blade is a 3-mana 3/2 weapon with Death Rattle. Trigger the Death Rattle of a random friendly minion. So the idea here is that you can set it up specifically so you trigger the right Death Rattle, right? You play Necreon Blade on 3, you attack with it to kill something, then you play Blight Nozzle Crawler on 4, you attack with Necreon Blade, you get the Blight Nozzle Crawler ooze immediately. Now that actually seems like a pretty good curve. I'm just not sure Necreon Blade is what I want to be playing on 3 in most of my rogue decks. There needs to be some other Death Rattles that make me really want to play Necreon Blade. And I'm not sure those exist.
2 mana Death Rattles, the main ones that come to mind are Loot Hoarder and Bloodmage Thanos.
But it's not 2 mana Death Rattles, it's 4 mana Death Rattles that are relevant. Because this Necreon Blades one's a Death Rattle.
Oh, right, sure, okay.
So, I mean, in that sense, it's better than if it was a battle cry for sure, because you wouldn't have to have the minion stick around. You just play the blade, and then you play the minion afterwards and attack with the last charge of the blade.
Yeah,
so, I mean, Myra is the other one, right? So, like, it's Myra's 5 mana, obviously, not 4. Yeah. But if you use the blade... If you just don't use it on the... You kind of have agency over using the blade, right? Which is important. So you can obviously activate that Myra Death Rattle immediately, which can be pretty powerful. I mean, I think Necreon Blade is by far the best Death Rattle synergy card we've seen for a while for Rogue. Yeah. I'm just not sure if you really want to play it. It does work with... What's it? Roll the Bones? The 2 mana spell that draws you a card, and if it's Death Rattle, you draw and you keep drawing until you... Not Death Rattle, I think. Oh, no, wait, it's not... Is it just an extra card, or do you keep drawing? I can't actually remember.
That's fine. I'm not sure if it's...
Anyway, I'll have a look. What were you going to say about Necreon Blade and the existing Death Rattles, I think?
Yeah, I'm not completely sold. I mean, I think most of the time Shadow Blade is just better. The 3 mana 3/2 weapon, that battle cry, your hero has immune, I think is mostly just better most of the time.
Yeah, definitely as a tempo tool, that is much better. Yeah. So Roll the Bones is draw a card. If it has Death Rattle, cast this again. So if you do keep hitting Death Rattle cards, you will just keep drawing.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm just saying, for whatever rogue deck is full of lots of Death Rattle cards. I mean, if you're breaking Necreon Blade to play like Ken as well, that's relatively powerful.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it could be.
Weaponized Pinata. That's one of the 4 mana Death Rattle cards.
Oh yeah, boys. Although currently, not even Shadow Blade is seeing much play right now. Rogue doesn't seem to currently really be needing a weapon on 3 that much. I mean,
I think Shadow Blade doesn't see play for different reasons. It doesn't see play because you want to play 2 mana dagger into Henge Clan Thug in almost every rogue deck. So this is different. Necreon Blade is for a deck where you're not playing Henge Clan Thug. I mean, that's the key to me, right? So this is not something for Odd Rogue, and it's not something for it's not something for Odd Rogue, and it's not something for Miracle Rogue. This is for a new rogue archetype, which is a Death Rattle Rogue specifically, right?
Which they must have been trying to push for how long now?
Yeah, but like Necreon Blade, I mean, the more and more we're talking about, this is by far the best weapon they've printed in a long time, I think. I think it's better than Shadow Blade, because the decks you put this in, it is more useful than Shadow Blade is in any other deck, basically.
Yeah, sure, yeah. I mean, this could be quite strong. I mean, but we also just have to wait and see what other Death Rattles they come out with, right?
Yeah. There definitely needs to be some more support for it. It's not something I'm expecting to see play with what we currently know of. You know, we need some more powerful Death Rattles. And I mean, obviously we need those to make Myra good as well. And it's going to have to be good, you know, in that kind of deck. I mean, the other one is... what's the 4 mana 5/3 that recurs itself? It goes dormant. I forgot the name of it now. Sherazin. Yeah, so Sherazin is another one. You can play Sherazin on 4, attack with the Necreon Blade, you get an extra dormant Sherazin. I'm just not sure that's actually going to make it, that's really going to work in the Death Rattle Rogue. Yeah. Because Sherazin is...
a bit too much Happy Christmas Land.
Yeah, Sherazin's Death Rattle doesn't really go well with a Death Rattle Rogue, weirdly enough, because you actually want to be playing lots of cards in a turn. That's not really how the Death Rattle Rogues are going to work a lot of the time. So, yeah. Okay, next up we have another rogue card, Academic Espionage. Academic Espionage is a 4 mana epic spell. Shuffle 10 cards from your opponent's class into your deck. They cost 1. So Yeah, once again, the Burgle Rogue. Obviously, the immediate synergies with this are tests, because once you play these cards, you can play tests and you get to play them again. The nice thing about this is if you are at the very late stage where you've run out of cards, or maybe you just played Myra's Unstable Elements and you've run out of cards, Academic Espionage will give you a deck full of one-cost cards, which can be quite powerful if you get any good rolls. The big problem is that in any other scenario, playing Academic Espionage, spending 4 mana to do nothing, importantly, and then drawing random one-cost cards, or drawing one random cards from your opponent's class instead of drawing your own cards, is not really the most powerful effect. I mean, they have to be really, really powerful to make up for that in terms of costing only one. And the problem is you're not drawing extra cards when you do that, right? So sure, you get these one cost cards, but you're still only drawing one card a turn, so you're going to just be floating mana, and you're not actually making a great use of the fact that they are one cost.
Yeah, but sure. Also, the thing is that, I mean, it's a kind of card where you can expect the Trollden video, you can expect the highlight reels to be insane, right? Where someone played it and then got like Tyrion, or
one mana Jaraxxus,
or got like Shadowwalk Shaman, got Shadowwalk Shaman cards and basically like Shadowwalked the opponent, right?
That's not possible. Like, all of these random class things, that Shadowwalk is irrelevant for all of them. Like, yes, Shadowwalk can do your own battle cries, but it's impossible for Shadowwalk to ever create, for a Shadowwalk combo to ever be created in your deck like this, because most of the cards because most of the cards you need are not class cards. Life Drinker and Saronite are not class, so there's no way you reasonably are going to have both of those in the deck that has this. That's just not happening.
Yeah.
And then you have to get Grumble and Shadowwalk. That's not happening. No. That's not realistic. The realistic scenarios are like powerful cards like Jaraxxus, Gul'dan, the Death Knights. Those are the big key things. Those are the things where you actually get to use the rest of the mana as well, to make use of them in that turn.
Gul'dan is obviously quite ridiculous.
Yeah, or just getting card draw.
Whole ridiculous, yeah.
I mean, any card draw that costs 1 is good.
I mean, you steal your opponent's, you get sprint.
Sure, or you steal, you get a 1 mana Ultimate Infestation, right? Then all of a sudden, the fact that you have a deck full of one-cost cards is good.
Oh boy!
I mean, to play this against Druid, there's a lot of card draw you can get.
Starfire.
Yeah.
But we'll see. It's more of a meme card, right?
Yeah.
I definitely feel it's more casual card that you play for the laughs rather than to actually win.
Yeah, I mean, people have enjoyed playing with Test. This is a card that helps the Test deck for sure. Because you get to pack so many, class cards, or your opponent's class cards, into one card, and that's kind of important. But ultimately, unless you can find a way to, unless you really want to self-mill yourself with Myra's Unstable Elements and then play Academic Espionage, I'm just not sure how relevant it ever is.
Happy Christmas Land.
I think you have to high roll hard on what the cards are for it to matter.
Yep.
And the high rolls are very good. That's where the Trollden videos come in, when you see the high rolls. But I think most of the time, Academic Espionage and cards like this are not really what you want. I mean, you could play it alongside cards like Sprint in your deck, which can help you use them. I mean, but yeah, anyway.
Sure.
Next up, we have Pogo Hopper, a reference to who Blizzard have already decided will win the 2018 Hearthstone World Championships, with Bunny Hopper having made it through to the World Champs already. Usually what they do is they print a card for, or often what they've done is print a card for winners of previous World Championships with like Fiery Bat, and people have been joking that Pogo Hopper is the already ordained one for Bunny Hopper, based purely on the name, of course, and the fact that it is a bunny.
And the fact that he said himself that's his favorite card.
Yeah, well, that's sure. But he's saying that because it's a bunny that hops, I'm sure. Come on. Anyway, Pogo Hopper is a 2-mana 1/1 mech. It's a rare, and it has Battle Cry, gain +2/+2 for each other Pogo Hopper you played this game. So the idea here is that you want to bounce your Pogo Hopper or generate extra Pogo Hoppers, and the Pogo Hoppers keep getting stronger in something reminiscent of the Jade mechanic almost. I mean, the kind of the sick combos here are like Pogo Hopper, Lab Recruiter, Pogo Hopper plus Shadow Step.
But you really have to you
have to
try and
work
build
hard
the
for
deck
it.
around it, and it's mostly going to be I'm not sure it's going to be so great.
Yeah, I mean, the point here is the first Pogo Hopper is very bad at a 2-mana 1/1. The second Pogo Hopper is a 2-mana 3/3, which is all right, but it's never on 2, so it's not that powerful, right? It's okay, but realistically, that's not that important. You need to be getting the 3rd, 4th, 5th Pogo Hoppers. So, maybe it's a decent bounce card in like Quest Rogue. It looks like, oh, this would be a good card to bounce. But ultimately, that doesn't really matter because in the late game, they're just going to be 4/4s. So it doesn't matter how many Pogo Hoppers you've played. When you play the Pogo Hopper, I think it's still going to be
It doesn't become a 4/4 base stats. So the Battle Cry doesn't. The Battle Cry is separate. So what you do is you get 4/4, and then you get the
buffs. Maybe.
As I read it, and as I understand how it works, because remember the 4/4 changes the base stats only.
Sure, but it doesn't change the stats in your hand. It changes them on the board, which is different as well. Because
That changes them on your hand, though, doesn't it?
No. You might, but I think you're right. Positive battle cries might affect your stats, but like if you think about it, like when your opponent hexes and stuff, that doesn't affect the stats. Like the quest effect is a consistent aura effect that affects every minion. So that's why, like when the minions get hexed or polymorphed, they're still 5 or 4/4s now. Because that's like the new polymorphed minion or hex minion is getting applied to. Pogo Hopper, I think, might get the buff, but ultimately, Quest Rogue, this doesn't help you complete your quest. Like, you would rather quest on any other minion other than Pogo Hopper that's in that deck, so I don't really think that's actually relevant. But
so this is a meme deck incoming, basically.
I don't think Pogo Hopper is that bad. I actually think Pogo Hopper is decent. I'm just...
is it deck for it?
Yeah, it needs to find the right deck, and I just think there's probably better things to do with most of your mana than play Pogo Hoppers or bounce Pogo Hoppers and getting extra Pogo Hoppers. Maybe for the kind of Lab Recruiter fatigue deck, but even that I doubt. Moving on to Shaman, we have Eureka. Eureka is a 6-mana rare spell. Summon a copy of a random minion from your hand. Eureka is... something that immediately screams combo potential. And then you realize that Ancestor's Call is actually just a card that exists in the classic set, which is 4 mana, summons a random minion from your hand and your opponent's hand. And for any kind of combo deck where you're actually going to finish them off after you do it, then, it's pointless to play Eureka over Ancestor's Call because you'd rather just have more mana. So any kind of Malygos synergies are kind of already out the window because they don't exist now with Ancestor's Call. Eureka's not going to change that.
Yeah, and I mean the other approach is because it's a one-side effect. You could just play like a big shaman in terms of like high value minions, so like Lich King, Ysera. I mean, and play it almost like Recruit Warrior, right? I mean, it's similar in a way to the what's it called? The Gather the Party.
Gather your party.
Gather the Party. But this, it also, I don't know. It just feels a bit too gimmicky to be good, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's definitely the deck it has to be in, and I'm not really seeing that deck come together. But maybe when we do, we'll be screaming for this card.
Oh my god.
Yeah. You see what I did there. Okay, next up we have Storm Chaser. Storm Chaser is a 4-mana 2/4 elemental. It's a rare. Battle Cry, draw a spell from your deck that costs 5 or more. If we look at the current Shaman spells that cost 5 or more, the big one that sticks out is Volcano. That is currently pretty much the card that Storm Chaser will draw. That is something that we put in most of our decks. For Shadowwalk Shaman, which is something people do think about with this card, I think this is actually not that good because it's an elemental, and you actually don't want more elementals in your deck because you play Sandbinder, and you really want Sandbinder to only draw Glacial Shard or Grumble. So that's a cost essentially for putting Storm Chaser in your deck, even though you do get the Volcanoes that can help you with removal. So maybe sometimes it's good for that deck, but overall I actually don't think it's good for Shadowhawk Shaman.
Yeah, it's also what are there any other spells that cost 5 or more that you might want ever? Like
There's the Spellstone. So if you're playing the Spellstone combo Snow Fury Giant deck, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
And I'm seriously, like, Volcano and the Spellstone are both good cards to draw. So if you are actually playing this deck, this card's not terrible. It's just a 4-mana 3/4, and that's not really helping you get... I mean, maybe it's good enough if it's drawing you Volcano. I'm not sure, though.
I mean, it is better than Novice Engineer. I mean, not Novice Engineer, Gnomish Inventor.
Sure, it is. So yeah, I think Storm Chase is going to have to find its home in a very specific deck. I don't really see it finding its home in an elemental deck specifically, even though it is an elemental, because drawing Volcano is not really something you want to do in an elemental deck. Elemental decks tend to be very board based already, so you don't want to be playing symmetrical board clears like Volcano.
Yeah.
Okay, next up we have an elemental that is slightly more relevant for elemental decks. That's Thunderhead. Thunderhead is a 4-mana 3/5 elemental. It's an epic, and it reads, after you play a card with Overload, summon 2 1/1 sparks with Rush. So one of the best combos with this card is Zap, something you pointed out, which basically turns Zap into a 0-mana Grievous Bite in a way, except that you get to assign the other 1 damage as you please, ignoring Taunt, of course, or ignoring the complications of Taunt. So, I mean, that seems pretty decent. 4-mana 3/5. Are you happy to play this in an elemental deck?
I'm pretty happy to play this in an elemental deck. And my first thought is, yeah, sure, comboing it with cards like Zap is obviously good. Lightning Bolt, Earth Shock, the one we're going to talk, the next
Earth
spell
Shock
we're going to talk about.
doesn't have Overload. But
oh, right, shit, it does. Oh, crap, it doesn't, yeah.
Yeah, it's not just spells.
I just thought cheap spells, and then I realized, oh, wait,
no,
okay.
It has to be Overload.
Basically, the ones then are Lightning Bolt and Zap are kind of the ones where, and then the spell we're going to talk about next, the next new spell.
Yeah,
those are kind of the cards that synergize with it, because getting 2 1/1s with Rush, I think, is quite powerful.
Yeah.
I mean, a 4-mana 3/5 is kind of okay. I mean, we've seen it before, but, like, it's bad if it doesn't have any other abilities, but in this case, the ability is quite powerful potentially. It's almost a little bit like Violet Teacher, actually.
Yeah, exactly. That's the card that it kind of most... jumps out to me for comparison for minions, because... in this case with Thunderhead, it's when you play a card with Overload, so they don't have to be spells either. They could be minions.
Yeah, sure.
But, similar to Violet Teacher, you're kind of getting tokens when you play other cards, let's say.
What's that big taunt with?
Drakari Defender. 3-mana 2/8.
Yeah, I mean...
Or you can go Thunderhead into Earth Elemental. That's kind of a curve way to do it. And then you can... It's not terrible, and you're sticking to your elemental plan. The big problem is that Overload cards have a lot of cost to them, because Overload is a pretty rough mechanic to deal with. I mean, we see the Shaman decks that do well right now generally don't play too many Overload cards, and in Shadowhawk Shaman, one of the most skill testing things is actually how you use your Overload cards. A lot of players, I think, a lot of the time mess up how they use their overloads without, planning their turns far ahead enough. I think this is a good payoff for playing overload cards as well, which is important. Because as you say, getting the 2 1/1s is pretty powerful. It's just a question of really whether this is something you want to play in a deck. And once again, not really good for Shadowhawk Shaman either. Definitely, because it's obviously an elemental. That's one of the reasons. But one of the other cards that it will synergize with that you were talking about is Voltaic Burst. So Voltaic Burst is a 1-mana rare spell. Summon 2 1/1 sparks with Rush, and it has Overload 1. So obviously these are exactly like the little sparks that we see coming from the Thunderhead, or similar at least. And you get, once again, 2 little 1/1s with Rush. So 1 mana to kind of deal 2 1/1, or to deal 1 damage to 2 different minions, or let's say to be able to assign the 1 damage as you wish.
It's pretty good, I think. I mean, it's a cheap card that goes, like we said with Thunderhead. it's like semi removal. I mean, in a way, it's similar to what's the Paladin one? My mind just slipped. Lost in the Jungle.
Sure.
I mean
Because you
that's
get the
one way
two
of looking at
minions.
it. But obviously,
Yeah.
this has got Rush and the Overload.
Yeah,
So
I mean, paying the one overload for just two 1/1s seems like a pretty weak effect. I mean, if we compare it to like Zap, I mean,
Zap is,
it
I think,
doesn't
probably
compare
the
favorably to that, right?
or lightning bolts. Like
Yeah, exactly.
those are the kind of two that you'd probably want to run in a deck with Thunderhead.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not actually convinced by Voltaic Burst, even though it doesn't seem like a bad card on its own. I think only if you want cheap Overload cards, specifically if you want the Overload one, maybe for the kind of Overload Shaman decks with the Spellstone and stuff. But with those decks, you actually generally want 3 Overloads so that one card will completely level up your Spellstone at a time. You don't want to have to be using multiple Overload cards to level up your Spellstone. Like, that's my experience of actually playing that deck. But yeah, I'm also not sure that this card is generally just powerful enough for that kind of a deck.
So we'll have to see. But I mean, I think, just judging from some of the cards, they're definitely trying to push in a more tempo-y elemental shaman. It definitely seems that's what, and Blizzard are trying to like force feed us, and we're like, no, thank you. But Blizzard's like, no.
Much like with the Death Rattle and Thief Rogues.
Exactly. It's like, no, we don't want it, but take it.
Okay, next up we are on to Warrior. Warrior, we got the legendary spell. So this is Dr. Boom's spell. It is the Boom Ship. The Boom Ship is a 9-mana legendary spell. Summon 3 random minions from your hand. Give them rush.
Oh boy.
So once again, something that surprised me, I think, a little bit is a lot of these spells, I would have imagined they would have synergized directly with their scientists, in this case, Boom. But Boom Ship really doesn't, and almost none of them seem to synergize directly. They seem to be 2 totally different directions. I mean, this, to me, screams big warrior, recruits warrior. I want to be getting really big minions with my Boom Ship. I don't want to just get, like, middling mechs that I put in my deck.
Yeah, so that's the thing as well. I mean, I think about this card, it reminds me a little bit of Varian in a way, if you remember Varian.
Yeah.
But
except that you don't get to draw the cards.
Except you don't get to draw. Cool. But I mean, like putting 3 and you need to have these cards in your hand, so it doesn't actually generate any card advantage. It just in this one you're basically saving resources because you can potentially get 30 mana worth of resources for 9 mana, right? I think it costs 9 mana, right?
Yeah. And I think, realistically, this is kind of a fallback for Recruit Warrior in the bad scenario where you actually draw the minions instead of getting them with Recruit Your Party and, or Gather the Party, and Woe Cleaver. Those are obviously the ways you always want to get the minions because you're getting them straight from deck onto board, which is generally what you want with a recruit deck. That is how the recruit mechanic works. Whereas Boom Ship is kind of the fallback. And this is where it isn't really punished for being legendary because I don't think I would ever want to include 2 of this in my deck anyway. So, I mean, I think it kind of makes sense there. And giving them rush is pretty powerful with some cards like
that's what I think
Rotface as well. Yeah.
Like, like the fact is, if it didn't have Rush, I would have been like, I don't think it's very good. The fact that they have Rush means it directly impacts the board. And like you say, with things like Rotface or, it's maybe Rotface or anything else with Charge or...
Yeah, I mean, Rotface, you can just get the immediate damage on Rotface to get the extra legendaries. There's not a lot of other great ones, but...
You just stabilize the board, basically, is the aim. Right?
Yeah, this is kind of just the fallback for that deck, right? I don't think it's a key part of that deck. It doesn't actually make Recruit Warrior that much better, importantly. I'm actually just not really sure where I want to use Boom Ship. I think most of the time, I'd rather put Dr. Boom in my deck than Boom Ship.
Sure, sure, it's just... I think it's kind of cool.
Yes, it is a cool effect.
Design. It's a cool card. Whether it will see play, whether it's good enough, time will tell.
Yeah, but it's not really something you want to reliably build around because it is obviously a legendary and because it costs 9 mana. Those are 2 key reasons I don't want to build around it. Next up, we have Ethereum. I did it. I said I was going to do it. We have Eternium Rover. Eternium Rover is a 1-mana 1/3 mech somebody at Blizzard has investments in Ethereum and wants people to constantly say Ethereum, and that's why they gave it this card this name. That's my suspicion. So we have a 1-mana 1/3 mech here, which is super important. That alone was something we spoke about previously as something that mech deck needs. It needs a way to curve out early. It needs hardy mechs to play early on. We have upgradable Framebot for 2, and now we have Eternium Rover for 1. So that's pretty important. A 1-mana 1/3 mech is a great target for Magnetic to facilitate this mech deck that they're pushing. Then, of course, it also has, whenever this minion takes damage, gain 2 armor. So that's probably not that relevant a lot of the time. There's slight synergies with Bladed Cutlass or whatever that thing is. The 2-mana 0/2 weapon that has attack equal to your armor. Yeah. Sure. Bladed Gauntlet. Yeah.
Bring Fiery Warhex back.
Sure, but I mean this rover needs to take 2 sources of damage for that to kind of even get up to 4 attack. So I'm not really sure that.
Fiery Warhex.
Yes, to get to better than Fiery Warhex, sure. But I mean that's not really that likely. So I don't think that's the key synergy. I think what we really need is to see a 2-mana mech that has Magnetic to kind of facilitate Eternium Rover. That's the key thing. I do think that this card is pretty powerful, and it's one of the main reasons that Mech Warrior will succeed if it does succeed. 1-mana 1/3s have historically been very important for tempo board-based decks as a way to fight for the board early on and have some chance to control the board. And having this alongside the Town Crier as 1-drops in a rush and mech deck, if we're playing the other rush cards alongside the mech cards.
Tempo mech rush warrior.
Yeah. In that kind of a warrior. I mean, it definitely helps, I think. So that's definitely maybe a way we could see Eternium Rover seeing play. So I actually think Eternium Rover is pretty important as long as it gets a 2-mana magnetic mech. That's the key thing that's going to make me look at this as something
honestly,
playable.
I think that's going to be what a whole bunch of different decks, a whole bunch of the mech decks I think revolve around that in a way.
Yeah, they need some more cheap magnetic minions, but ultimately none of the other classes actually have a 1-mana 1/3 mech, right? So it's that 2-mana magnetic mech, if they do decide to make one, is gonna be more key for warrior than for any other class.
Yeah, sure.
And ultimately, if you are buffing this up with magnetic, you're probably going to get that effect going off more than once. So you probably will gain a fair bit of armor, which is not too bad. But it doesn't really help you with your tempo game plan most of the time. And then speaking of mechs, for Warrior, we have another mech here, Security Rover. So clearly Rover seems to be their theme for mechs. Security Rover is a 6-mana 2/5 mech. Whenever this minion takes damage, summon a 2/3 mech with Taunt. So the first thing I noticed with this, it doesn't have Magnetic. So you can't attach this to another mech immediately to get that 2/3 mech on the board straight away, and that's a big issue for me. If you have Boom, if you've played Boom, then this will have Rush. That's pretty decent, but still 6-mana 2/5 Rush. I mean, we can do a lot better than that already with natural Rush cards.
Yeah, and the problem that I have is that you even if you get the 2/3, like with 1/2/3, you essentially 4/8 worth of stats, and that's not really great for a 6-drop. And I mean, and you have to make it work for it, so it only becomes decent. Like, I mean, first of all, most of the part you probably still play Huffer, right? I mean, like a lot of times Huff is probably just better. I mean, it's all depends if the mech tag is that important. I mean, not not Huff, Hogger.
Oh, Hogger, right? Sure.
Hogger, not Huffer, Hogger. The one that summons 2/2 taunts.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a little bit better than that, especially in obviously the Boom mech deck we're talking. The thing is, you want to use this with the minions that can damage, or other cards that can damage Security Rover immediately, right? Your Whirlwinds.
In a rage.
Yeah, Cruel Taskmasters, those kind of things.
Sure.
And maybe if it has if it has rush as well, then, and you get like, let's say you play this after Dr. Boom with Inner Rage, you get to deal 4 damage immediately, and you're going to get 3 mechs, which will also have rush.
And the question really is that synergy like is that, are those synergies enough to make a 6-mana 2/5 playable? Is that what we want to be doing in our deck? Is the question.
Yeah, and I think the answer is not really.
No, right? The answer is no.
Yeah. And importantly, this also doesn't have taunt. I mean, that's something that could have gone a long way to making it look more appealing. Yeah. Okay, next up we have Omega Assembly. So this is another card, another warrior card. This is a 1-mana spell. So the first of the Omega spells that we're seeing. It is a rare, and it reads, discover a mech. If you have 10 mana crystals, keep all 3 cards.
Value! Yeah, boys. So, I mean... So it's like, we've seen cards like this, Blazing Invocation, I Know a Guy. We've seen similar 1-mana Discover card effects, and those have almost never seen play. This seems decent. I mean, Discover Mech, I mean, if you play this when you have 10 mana, 1-mana draw 3 cards, it's pretty decent. Like, it's pretty decent in terms of fighting out that late game value. Yeah. But the question is, if it's good enough at that point in the game, not completely sold. Like,
yeah, I mean, obviously, once you've played Dr. Boom, it gets a lot better. But we can't build a deck full of mechs and cards that are only good after we've played Dr. Boom, or our deck is going to fail a high percentage of the time, because up until 7, it's rubbish, and even after then, we still have to have drawn and played Dr. Boom on 7. So I think. Yeah. When we have to put too many caveats and like, if you've drawn Dr. Boom, this card is good, or if you've played Dr. Boom, I think that's a big problem.
Yeah, so I don't know. Like, I want to like it, but I'm not sure. It's probably not going to see much play.
Yeah, I do think that keeping all 3 cards is pretty decent, but even then, getting 3 random mechs essentially for 1 mana, probably only 1 or 2 of them are actually playable. I mean,
sure, exactly.
There's a lot of security rovers that you can get as well, or that 7 mana 3/8 one, the other hunter one, the other warrior one.
Security rover. I mean, your dude will be protected then, right? If you get that one, on the bright side.
Yeah, but you are going to be getting those at a higher rate, remember, as well. Even from getting all of them, because they are class mechs. So you're also going to be getting the Eternium rover at a relatively high rate, because this is a 1-mana, or because that's also a class mech. So in terms of value, the class mechs are pretty bad to get from this, right? I mean, Eternium Rover's good, but it's only good because you can play it on 1.
Yeah, I mean, you don't want Eternium Rover on, after turn 10.
Yeah. So I'm not super convinced by Omega Assembly because mostly the warrior mechs have been pretty bad so far, bar Eternium Rover. And moving on to the neutrals finally, we have Augmented Elec. Augmented Elec is a 3-mana 3/4 beast. Whenever you shuffle a card into your deck, shuffle in an extra copy. So the immediate synergies with this are pretty much rogue mostly. We have Lab Recruiter, we have Felderai Strider, and we have the espionage card that we spoke about earlier. I forgot the name of it already. Academic Espionage. There we go. So with all of those, getting extra copies is pretty good. Felderai Strider is the one that sticks out to me as probably the best. To curve Augmented Elec into Felderai Strider is pretty nice because it gives you a much higher chance of getting those 4/4s.
Yeah. And, I mean, the nice part about it really is the fact that it's a serviceable 3-mana 3/4. Yeah. Like, it's not as bad, it's not that bad on curve. It presents that potential late game combo while still being able to, like I said, be able to contest. And then it's one of those things almost that your opponent needs to feels like they need to deal with it as soon as possible. Otherwise, things can snowball very quickly, I think.
Yeah, I think for like a kind of a tempo rogue deck, maybe one that is closer to what we're seeing with the sprint miracle rogue lists at the moment. Augmented Elec is another 3-drop that can go in that kind of deck, alongside Hench Clan Thug, and maybe it takes the place of SI7 Agent. And then just going Augmented Elec on 3 is pretty good because a lot of the 3 drops out there right now are also 3/3s. One of the reasons Hench Clan Thug is pretty good at beating them up as well. And Augmented Elec is 3/4, so contest those well. And then we also have the fact that if you play Felderai Strider afterwards, there's a really high percentage chance you're going to be hitting those spiders afterwards. So, I mean, Augmented Elec seems pretty good to me. Mostly, I'd say in Rogue at this point. Are there any other
It's another neutral card that's basically a Rogue card. Right?
Sure. I mean, are there any other classes? What are the other synergies we're missing with this?
Dire Frenzy?
Ooh, Dire Frenzy. That's actually quite interesting. Because
that's a bit of synergy, right?
Yeah, you'll shuffle in 6 copies of the minion.
So you play this into turn 4, Dire Frenzy on itself.
Well, I was thinking less Dire Frenzying itself and more Dire Frenzying a Stone Tusk Ball. Still,
sure.
I'm still living that dream where we get lots of Stone Tusk Balls.
For the combo deck will forever live on. Sure.
I mean, okay, on Dire Frenzy, even if you play it on Augmented Elec, it's not bad. But you don't really want to be maybe. I mean, there are 3 mana 5/6s, so maybe you do want to draw those. I'm not sure.
Yeah. So I think it's a pretty solid card, and
Archbishop Benedictus. That's the other.
Oh boy.
10 mana, go to 60 cards. Basically.
Let's time to play Magic, boys.
I mean that deck gets to 60 cards by itself anyway. I don't think it needs Augmented Elec, so I don't really think that's. I don't think you need things to synergize with Archbishop Benedictus. So
no, probably not.
I'm not really sure what other synergies this.
Well, wait, is it? I just thought of something. Is it your
Astral Tiger? That's another one.
Is it whenever a card gets shuffled, or only your cards?
No, whenever you shuffle a card into a deck. So if your opponent plays the darkness,
if you Psychic Scream.
I think it will shuffle double copies.
So, I mean,
the other synergy is this into the darkness. So you get 6 candles in their deck, so you're more likely to get the darkness to come sooner.
Oh, sure.
I'm not convinced by that, but if you do need to get the darkness, if that's a reasonable curve, then maybe.
Okay.
But I still don't like the darkness because I don't like paying 4 mana to do nothing.
Yeah.
Okay, so I mean, Augmented Elec probably got decent potential, mostly in Rogue at this point, but we'll see. 3 mana 3/4 Beast is not something to ignore as well. It could definitely be Hunter decks.
For Hardmaster in Hunter potentially.
Yeah, there's a couple synergies with Hunter, so maybe there is some way to make it work there. Next up, we have Mechanical Whelp. Mechanical Whelp, a 6 mana 2/2 mech. Death Rattle, summon a 7/7 Mechanical Dragon. This Mechanical Dragon is also a mech. So, these are obviously kind of meant to be targets for Magnetize, I suppose. The idea is, or Magnetic, sorry. The idea is your opponent doesn't want to kill the Magnetic Whelp because there's a bigger minion hiding underneath it. So they're going to leave it on board, and then you get to play a Magnetic minion. We've seen traditionally these kind of minions are bad, right? I mean,
yeah.
There was a brief period, the 5 mana 2/2 with Death Rattle. I forgot its name. That summons the 8/8. Saw play in Paladin because you could Spike Ridge Steed it. But this one's even more expensive, and you get a worse minion.
Yeah, I mean,
you got an 8/8 from that one. This time you got a 7/7, and this one got 6. The only difference here is that both of these are mechs.
Yeah, I mean the Feign. Some of the synergies are there, but you want Steeping Oozling.
Yeah, Hunter has the best other synergies with it. I mean,
but you probably still rather want to play the eggs, over this.
Exactly.
You don't really want to be playing this.
Yeah, this isn't all that much better than the egg, and that's the key thing. The difference with the Whelp is that it can actually attack to activate itself. So,
sure.
I mean, that's the one other benefit it has over the egg once you play it, but yeah, I'm not sure. There's no reason to play this in a Death Rattle Priest, is there? With Zerek's Cloning Gallery, it's better than Ken in that scenario. With the Reckless Experimenter. It's a little bit better than Ken there.
Sure. But it feels like the situations in which you've got all these great cards to get this to work, you're probably already in a good position. Right?
Yeah.
All the setup this requires feels a bit bleh.
Yeah, I'm not really convinced. I usually want these effects where you get a weak body up front and a good body on the death rattle at a much cheaper cost. I mean, Nerubian Egg is the classic. That's the bar that was set, and even the Devil's Saw Egg doesn't really live up to that bar. So I don't really see Mechanical Whelp kind of living up to that either at 6 mana, just because you're going to struggle to do anything else in that same turn.
Yeah.
And then next up we have the Replicating Menace. Replicating Menace, a 4-mana 3/1 mech. It's a rare. It has Magnetic and Death Rattle. Summon 3 1/1 Microbots. So those 1/1 Microbots are also just mechs. They're just 1/1 mechs. So 4 mana, if we look at the magnetic side of this, to give your minion +3/+1 and the Death Rattle, is that really something you want to do?
Which one? Sorry.
Replicating Menace.
Oh, Replicating Menace. It's like, it reminds me of what was that card? Ignapper in a way. The fact that it's, you top load. So let's start off by putting this. You never want to play this by itself. Like you almost never want to just play a 4-mana 3/1. It becomes semi-decent if you can trade, like you magnetic this to something, you trade, and then you leave behind a bit of a board.
Yep.
So that kind of, the synergies are mainly in sort of token-based strategies, with things like Power of the Wild, Solve the Forest, those sort of things.
Yeah. I mean, otherwise, if you can hit it on a mech immediately, it does give it a good attack damage boost to maybe trade up.
Yep.
But other than that, the effect is pretty weak, right? Getting the extra, mechs. I mean, there's maybe the vague synergy that those are other mechs that your magnetic minions can hit, but overall, I can't see myself playing Replicating Menace in. Let's look at the magnetic classes, right? In Warrior, I mean, there's not much better to do in Warrior a lot of the time, so that's maybe the best case for it. In Paladin, I'd rather just play Blessing of Kings, or there's so many good forecast cards, it's ridiculous. In Hunter, I'd rather just play a Beast deck once again and play Houndmaster.
Or even better, just play Flanking Strike, because
exactly.
you're getting the 3 damage and you're summoning the 3/3 instead of 3 1/1s.
Exactly. Once again, Beast synergies.
It's basically better, right?
Yeah, Beast synergies just feeling better. So, I mean, really only Warrior is the one that sticks out, and I'm not really sure that this is good there. I mean, this just looks like one of the weaker magnetic cards, I have to say that.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, and then next up we have Missile Launcher. Missile Launcher is a 6-mana 4/4 mech with magnetic. It's a rare. At the end of your turn, deal 1 damage to all other characters. So 6 mana to buff one of your minions 4/4 and give them the kind of mini Baron Geddon type effect that's not symmetrical. So
well, it's what's it? It's the Dread Infernal, basically.
Yeah, the Dread Infernal effect. Well, actually, sorry. It is actually symmetrical because it's all other characters.
So
it will hit
so
you.
Even your heroes.
Yeah, so even your hero as well.
So a 4/4 buff is not bad, but 6 mana 4/4 does not feel that great. I mean,
especially when the effect comes at the end of your turn as well.
If you want to beat Odd Paladin, sure. I mean, it's a neutral potential way of clearing the board repeatedly of 1/1s.
Yeah, of countering those kind of token decks. But overall, I think 6 mana for the 4/4 buff is pretty weak. If you play it by itself, maybe it's okay. But it's just, it's... I mean...
Not really infernal.
Yeah. It's definitely weaker than that. I'm struggling to see a good use for Missile Launcher other than very fringe scenarios where those kind of token decks are running wild.
Oh, it's got cool art at least.
Sure. Next up, we have Star Alina. Star Alina, a 7-mana, 7/7 epic minion with Battle Cry. If you control 3 minions with 7 health, deals 7 damage to all enemies. So the theme of this card is clearly 7 and events that will never happen and have basically no effect when they do. Because whilst the effect seems extremely powerful, if you control 3 minions with 7 health, you're probably doing pretty well. So I'm not sure you need to deal 7 damage to all enemies.
Yeah, you're probably winning. I mean, you're probably ahead on board and winning.
Yeah.
So, yeah, Starliner, I don't think so. I mean, no.
So, I mean, this is an effect that happens just as rarely as the name indicates, and it has almost as little effect as the name indicates. Because you're pretty much winning at that point. You don't need it. It's not going to tell you anything.
It's a term that comes from card games, but it's a relatively self-explanatory of win more. Like the time where you're playing this card and it's happening, you're probably already winning. So it's a bit unnecessary. I
saw one ridiculous wild combo with Aviana and Kuhn.
Oh, yes.
But,
Krakens.
Yeah, why would you ever do that instead of just... And Bran. But why would you ever do that instead of just Cthulhu, Malagos, many of the other Druid combos that are a lot stronger?
You want to use this card in particular, right?
Yeah, I mean, particularly if you want to win in the memeiest way in Wild, then sure. Exactly. But otherwise, not really much use. Yeah, for Star Alina. And that is going to be the end. A fitting way to finish our first impressions video on a 7-mana 7/7 that we are calling trash. So let's help.
Oh boy, did we just foresee the next Dr. Boom? Oh boy. Are we now? Is that going to be the tier 1 staple?
I think they made as a joke purely for people doing card reviews so they could call 7-mana 7/7s trash.
Yeah.
Because Star Alina is trash. But yeah, thanks a lot, everyone, for sticking around for such a long video. We're going to have a lot more cards to talk about in the next Magma Rages episode. So make sure you're subscribed to the channel, the YouTube channel, to check those out. If you have any feedback on any of these cards or any of the ones that are upcoming and you want to ask us, you can find us on Twitter at PandemoniaZA down there and at dib_gaming here for myself. So yeah, thanks a lot, everyone, and we'll see you. The next Magma Rages episode we're going to record on Tuesday after we've got a bunch of the cards, or a bunch more cards out to talk about. There's also a bunch of other news for us to talk about, as well as a lot of esports action that happened over this last weekend. So make sure you tune in for that. But for now, cheerio, everyone.
Cheerio.